Greetings. This is the second round of the Get Your Game On Store Championship. This is game number 2. We have Chris on the left playing Engineering the Future using one of the FFG alt arts for Engineering the Future. Tom is on the right playing Reina Roja. And Tom and Chris are the only two players of 16 at the Store Championship that were playing Engineering the Future. So don't see a lot of them. A lot of the players decided that Wayland or NBN had a better Anarch matchup. So we'll see if that proves to be correct. See if Engineering the Future could stand up to the Anarch onslaught. Looks like they both kept their first hands, and Chris is just setting up two pieces of ice, HQ and R&D, and one remote. Tom has a great start with the sure gamble starting off. Checks that remote, and it's just an Eve campaign. Doesn't quite make sense to trash it now. He does look like he plays Yogg. This is the Store Championship was all the way up to Kala Ghoda, and the most wanted list was in effect, so he had to spend extra influence for that Yogg. And it looks like it's the right breaker for that next bronze, but he's going to take some time to get his economy set up. Looks like Chris has a Jackson, and looks like a Vitruvius in his hand, possibly an Adonis as well. If this is a headlock variant of it, those campaigns are going to be really useful. And Tom's turn. He's just going to drop to start his first Glick. And it looks like he's taking some money from that Liberated account. And he's going to test the new remote. And he's going to trash that alt art Adonis campaign. Looks like he doesn't want Chris to have any kind of money with, which is the usual game plan with Reina Roja. Alright, Chris feels pretty confident that he can res that Eve campaign. Although at this point, Tom has gotten plenty of money. But it's hard to keep Engineering the Future down because they get that 1 credit per for the first install. So it's going to be hard to deny that. Looks like instead of icing up that Eve campaign, he's just going to take some extra money. Put the pressure on Tom, see if he wants to set himself back to trash it. Yeah, with the Eve campaign, it's pretty hard to make the decision. Looks like he's getting his credits up, and looks like he doesn't want Chris to have it. I think early on that's a pretty good choice, especially if you want to set up some lampreys or something like that. You can do that, and he has gotten a lot of economy, and that first pull was a really good one. Take out the agenda. It looks like it was the only one in a hand of 4, I think, at the time. Alright, Chris is going to decide what he wants to do now. Looking for more options. See if he can get some kind of economy. It looks like he may only have 6 or so credits. Looks like he installed and then probably took a credit. Alright, for the first click, Tom is just taking some money, then drawing a card. Looks like he's drawn into the wild side, so he may have a Faust in there as well. And looks like he has another Liberated, so he's going to be fine for money for a while now. He might also have some Parasites, so the next package may not be the best option now against Anarch. Chris is still looking for some more options now. Tom is taking liberated comp money, setting up that wild side. I don't think he has the chronotype yet. So he may be on 3 clicks for a while, but it does help him draw into that chronotype. And he runs into next gold, which is going to be a little rough. It's going to trash that Yogg and give him a couple net damage as well, which is a pretty good effect against for that 8 res cost. It's one of the best options. One of the best outcome you can expect. And it pretty much clears all of Tom's board except for those resources. And he didn't happen to have a same old thing. And I had worse. So it's going to take some clicks to get back to that same board state. Now Chris is getting back at it. And he happens to draw into that adjusted chronotype, so he should be back. Should be able to build up his board state pretty easily at this point. But he does need an answer for that next gold. Faust could work, but it's 3 cards at the moment. It may get a lot more expensive. Mimic and a Data Sucker is probably the best option now, as long as Chris gives him access to some of these to some of these central servers. And Engineering the Future is pretty close to getting back to the same credit level. Tom's just clearing out that liberated, seeing what options he has. Might still try to keep Chris poor by checking R&D. Gonna lay down the corroder. Just to see if he happens to have a next silver there. He's not rezzing. But Chris may still want to res the next silver anyway, and not what you want to see. Down there is it's an architect, so he's going to get a lot of tempo from this res. So the first subroutine fires. Chris is checking the top 5 cards, seeing if he wants to install any of those. Looks like he probably is installing something because he might have gained a credit there, or maybe he's just paying for it. Decided if he wants to bring back that Eve campaign. Nope, he just decides to install something from his hand, and he's getting his Engineering of the Future credit on the runner's turn. And Tom gets an access. Looks like it's Ash, and decides to trash it. It's probably a good idea to trash it at this point while you're accessing it instead of waiting for it to be in a remote behind 2 or 3 pieces of ice. And he does call Chris's bluff and goes for that remote, and didn't look like Chris had enough to break it. to rest that piece of ice in front. So Tom is at 4 points, but his board state's not in a great spot. And there we have, I believe it's Media Blitz, so he's going to get that extra click from, which might have been Chris's plan all along. So now he has 4 credits each turn, as long as Tom can't score another agenda. And is putting down probably an asset of some kind, some way to get some more money. Looks like Chris is only at 3 credits at this point, but that means he can res most of his next dice. Chris is trying to decide. Maybe his best course of action is not give Chris any credits to be able to score out any of these agendas. He can run a remote, and it's a Jackson Howard, see if he wants to trash it. And he does. Looks like Tom does have an... did he have an Eater in his hand? His plan may be to keyhole an Eater. But he does seem to have a lot of the regular breakers as well. Yeah, it looks like he does an Eater and a keyhole and a Parasite in his hand. So that Parasite's going to be pretty nice for next silver, as well as putting it on next gold, so he can use Mimic to break through it. And Chris just spends his time to score out that accelerated beta test, but doesn't fire it without the Jackson on the board, which is probably why he had it there in the first place the turn before. At this point, Tom doesn't have any source of economy at this point, and it's going to take a little bit to set up his Eater keyhole. Looks like he got his career fair on board, so if he has a way to use that, that might be able to set up some more economy for him to get to the point where he could start threatening R&D. Looks like he just makes a run on R&D and letting Chris fire off Architect. It doesn't seem like a good choice at this point. I mean, Chris may only be on 1 credits, but he's going to see what he has coming up in the next 5 turns, or 4 after installing one of them. And is likely to not allow Tom to get any agendas. But Tom may think that he can't res that remote ice, so if there is an agenda on top, he will get it. Whether it takes 1 click on R&D or 2 clicks by checking the remote. But there wasn't one, so it just worked out really well in Chris's favor. And Tom's going to check, even though he knows it's an Adonis, but he wants to trash it. Now he's at 0 credits. He has to decide what he wants to keep in his hand. Discarding an extra wild side and a Plascrete. And since he doesn't have any credits, he's just going to spend the 20-sided. Alright, Chris has a Jackson Howard. It's probably what he installed in that remote, and just taking a couple credits. And Tom's trying to figure out what can he do. Although he's ahead on agenda points, he's definitely falling way behind in this game. Chris doesn't have too many credits, but he does have a lot of res dice at this point. And he's checking that remote. It's just an Eve campaign. He can't do anything against it about that. Tom's trying to see if he has any more options. It looks like it's just a deja vu. And he doesn't look like he has any viruses in his discard pile unless he discarded one of them. And just taking some credits to the end of his turn. Looking to see if he has any viruses. I didn't see any there. I think the only program was that YOG. So you might just get rid of that deja vu. Alright, Chris is just getting some ice. Setting up so he can just score out any of the agenda that comes out. He can score out 4-2s because I think he has a biotic in his hand. Tom's trying to figure out if he can get any kind of economy going. Keeps drawing. He does have the career fair, so if he draws into any of the resource economy, he can play it without too much problem. Trying to keep his best 5 cards. And may give up on the keyhole plan. There's just too much ice on that R&D to be able to run through it multiple times. Unfortunately, he can't threaten the remote because most likely Chris will just fast advance as long as he's got that media blitz going. He may even have drawn to another one or close to getting a second one as well. So even if first one fizzles, you can get the next one going. Chris may be setting up either a no advance, 4 advancement agenda, or more likely another econ asset. Tom finally has some kind of finally be able to draw into a daily cast, so he can using that. Career fair, he does have a sure gamble, so just needs to get his credits at the right level. Possibly next turn he can play it. And he's just taking some credits now. Not sure if that Eater's going to do him a lot of good this game. He did have the Parasite to start trashing the ice, but decided to just leave the ice going on the board. That might have been a better play at this point, is start clearing out some of these ice. Since Chris has only been able to get that Eve campaign to stick at this point. So now that remote server, it might indicate that it's Jackson instead of anything else, and it's probably waiting for another ABT so you can fire it off. Still have it protected. I'd imagine if it was a Adonis campaign, he would have rezzed it. Might be an Eve campaign, he didn't want to take the tempo hit. But more likely it means it's either Breaker Bay or a Jackson. Unlikely to be an agenda, because you would have, if it was a 4 advanced agenda, you probably would have scored it. Unless it's the another copy of the mandatory upgrades. And then that leaves himself in danger of giving Tom one more agenda, so he's within one more score to win. Tom finally has some credit, setting up the Grimoire. And so it's time for Eater. Maybe he has some cutlery as well that could clear out some of these ice. But just ends up taking a credit towards the end. Alright, Chris is just trickling in that Eve campaign, seeing if he can get any agendas to score out. Can't quite see his hand. Not quite sure what he has. He hasn't gotten agendas in a while. Decides to just biotic out. See what he wants. Tom doesn't have any clots, so he can't do anything about this. Decides to just biotic out a Vitruvius with a counter on it. Makes a little bit of sense. He could always get the if his mandatory, if the media blitz goes away, he could always get back a biotic back. It's kind of neutral as well. He could get the biotic. He could get a hedge fund to cover the cost of the biotic. So it just gives him some options for towards the end. He gets back some ice that gets parasited if that ends up being what he needs at the time. So it does open up a lot of options. Maybe worth the cost of the biotic. And it looks like Tom does set up the Eater keyhole. Probably gonna see if there's what is on R&D. Chris doesn't have as many credits as he did before. Looks like maybe around 10 credits, maybe 8. So you probably can't res a lot of this ice. But you can res the next silver. If he still has that parasite, might be worth just bouncing off the next silver, parasite, and run again. And if he has enough clicks left. It is 3 subroutines at this point. Looks like he just bounces off, so you might set up a play to get a parasite on it. Looks like he still has a parasite in his hand. Chris draws into it. Hedge fund, plays that. Still has another, it looks like another biotic in his hand, so he's got a lot of options, and he sees that R&D is the biggest source of threat at this point. That Eve campaign's almost done. Alright, Tom's getting his wild side draw, getting his daily cast money. I think he's getting ready to parasite that next silver. With the Grimoire, he can trash it right away, or he's possibly going to play that short gamble first. Alright, he's Getting a few more credits. Trying to see if anything can do it. The problem with that keyhole is that although it gives him a lot of an option to see 3 cards, it does not lock R&D, so any card on top of R&D could be agenda that gets Chris 2 more points closer to winning. Tom is checking his heap, see if he's got anything there that could help him. It's going to be hard. Chris has a very strong board at this point. Reina has a tough time against engineering the future. It's hard to keep them poor, especially with the campaigns rolling in, especially if one of them sticks, plus the passive install credits. He hasn't trashed any pieces of ice at this moment. Finally decides to see what is in that server. Hopefully being able to use his Reina ability to cost Chris a little bit more credits. Yep, and it ended up being that Jackson. And he was probably setting up for an APT. And ends up getting just one Jackson back and some economy. I'm not sure. It might have been better to just bring back just the Jackson and give himself a better chance to draw into an agenda so he can just score it out, but not sure. He doesn't have that many credits, so possibly having a little bit more economy might help him in the long term. And it looks like another piece of next dice. This time it's 4 strength, next bronze, 4 pieces of next out on the board. I'm not sure if it makes sense for him to run at this point since that next silver is still out there. And he does have the parasite to just clear it away and not have to deal with it. I'd expect Tom to just let it end the run and see what else he can do. Although he has a little bit of economy, you don't want to spend it all on one run on R&D. Oh, he does decide to break it using data suckers and probably Eater, and breaks through the next silver. I think it looks like they're just checking their math. Tom might have missed one of the subroutines. And a wall static. So I had to use data sucker for it. And breaking it with Eater code or Eater. And that makes it even more rough. There's an Eli. It's going to be really hard to get through that. And I'm sure Chris is happy to res them all at once in one turn after already paying the extra Reina tax on the first piece of ice. It looks like Tom is paying the credits to get through. Hopefully getting an agenda in the process. It's not likely that Chris is running any real 3-pointers, maybe a global food, but he did get an agenda there. And this is where Chris's plan of having Vitruvius counter is really paying off, because he can just bring that back and score it all in one turn. Looks like he has enough credit with the Eve trickling off at the beginning of his turn that he can score it. Oh, it looks like he just uses a archive memory. And Tom is not a happy camper. And he installs something in that remote. Maybe he's setting up another Jackson Howard in it. Maybe he's setting up another uh, campaign in it. Most likely not putting the accelerated beta test in that. Just try and figure out how many credits it'll take for him to get through there. With the one data circuit counter, it looks like it'll be 2 plus 4, 6, 7, 8, 15 credits around there, depending on how many, if he wants to use any clicks to break the Eli. So somewhere between 11 and 15 credits to get through that R&D fort. It does clear out the ash from that remote, which may not be the best use of his credits. He doesn't have very many, and Chris does not necessarily want to use a Nash to score out anything, even if he had another, even if he only had the mandatory upgrades, he would have to have the Ash keep his agenda safe for 3 turns, or 2 turns, 2 whole turns of 2 of the runner's turns. Chris may be in position to score out that ABT next turn. Alright, he just finally decides to parasite that next silver. Taking 4 credits off the cost of running there and reducing, well, 4 plus 1 from the reduction in the next bronze as well. So that's, and now he does score that accelerated beta test. Takes him just 2 credits because he gets that 1 credit for engineering the future. So basically, that Eve campaign is just going to fund his next score. So now that R&D for it's a little bit more reasonable, especially if he's willing to use a couple clicks to break through the Eli. He could leave himself 1 click left, run through, hopefully get an agenda and steal it right after. But he doesn't have a whole lot of options. And Chris's Vitruvius counter is just gonna allow him to pull it back and possibly win the next turn. So it may actually be worse for him to find an agenda that way. He decides to just take some credits. He does have another daily cast that he can set up, but he knows there's not a lot of turns left. Looks like he is making a run. And just had enough to break through everything. And he does have an accelerated beta test in there. But it might have been a mandatory upgrades as well, so that might have been a better choice to pull out. And now I had to play with the Vitruvius counter. Just a great play by Chris there. I'm not sure if you already knew that Tom was playing keyhole, but it does give him a lot of options. And there it is. Able to score it out. So thanks for joining us for round 2. We'll have the next round coming up soon.